dreamers. Tonight, we journey into the vibrant world of Eden, where life thrives beneath the glow of the celestial bodies, Solara and Luminara. And if you enjoy this original story, then please don't forget to leave a like, share your thoughts, and consider subscribing for more content like this. It helps others find the channel and become weary dreamers. But for now, get cozy and settle in for an immersive journey into the magical world of Eden. Kaeldin Aramor stood atop the eastern watchtower of Marashar, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sapphire sun, Solara, began its descent. The wooden platform beneath his feet vibrated slightly as he absent-mindedly manipulated air currents around him, a habit that had intensified since his bonding with the aero orchid 2 seasons prior. Pale blue veins now traced his forearms, glowing softly with the day's waning light, and his once brown hair had taken on streaks of silver blue that rippled like wind-touched water. The village of Marashar spread out beneath him, a collection of stone and timber dwellings nestled in a valley where the western forests met the crystal plains. The settlement was strategically divided, though not by walls or barriers. The eastern half, bathed longest in morning sunlight, housed primarily Solaran families. The western portion, first to receive Luminara's emerald glow each evening, belonged to the Luminarans. The central plaza, with its massive quartz obelisk, served as neutral ground. Tonight would mark the Twilight Concordance, the twice-yearly festival celebrating the perfect alignment when both celestial bodies shared the sky in equal measure. It was the only time when both Solarans and Luminarans experienced their full power simultaneously, if only for a brief hour. A disturbance in the air currents alerted Kaeldin to someone's approach before he heard footsteps on the ladder. "Thought I'd find you up here," said Thana, her voice carrying the slight rasp characteristic of those bonded to fire-touched entities. "Elder Moraine is looking for you. Something about your demonstration for tonight." Thana Embertouch had been Kaeldin's friend since childhood. Her Solaran nature was emphasized by the flame-red highlights in her black hair and the scale-like patches of ruby skin that shimmered across her shoulders, the marks of her Pyra Serpent bond. Her second bond with sunfire crystals had given her fingertips a perpetual amber glow. "Tell him I'll be there shortly," Kaeldin replied, his eyes still fixed on the horizon. "I'm just thinking." Thana stepped closer, following his gaze. "About your third bonding. The festival would be the perfect time." Kaeldin's fingers tightened around the railing. His first bond with the aero orchid had given him basic control over air currents. His second, with crystalline sky dust, had enhanced his perception and granted him limited ability to solidify air into temporary platforms. But a third bond would be his final one if he wished to retain his humanity. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted. "The bond sages say the third should be chosen with utmost care. It's the first potentially dangerous bond." "Well, you'd better decide soon. Everyone's expecting a spectacle from the prodigious son of Elder Varin." Tharna's tone held no malice, only the frank honesty of long friendship. Besides, I heard Lyrian will be there. Kaeldin's cheeks warmed at the mention of Lyrian Nightshade. The Luminaran woman had caught his attention months ago during a trading delegation. Their interactions had been brief, but charged with an intensity that transcended their celestial differences. That's not relevant, he said unconvincingly. Tharna laughed. Of course it isn't. Just like it's not relevant that you've been practicing that ridiculous air spiral display for weeks. She turned toward the ladder. Don't be late. The preparations are already underway. As she disappeared below, Kaeldin returned his attention to the horizon, where the first silvery green glimmer of Luminara was becoming visible even as Solara still hung above the western mountains. He extended his hand, focusing his energy to draw a small current of air into a tight spiral above his palm. The sky dust particles bonded to his essence glittered within the vortex, creating a miniature galaxy that spun and danced. Yes, he would need to impress tonight. Not just for his father, not just for himself, but perhaps for her as well. With a closing of his fist, he condensed the air into a platform that gently lowered him from the watchtower. The village below had already begun its transformation. Lanterns of amber crystal captured Solara's light, while vessels of emerald glass stood ready to absorb Luminara's glow. Between them, the quartz obelisk in the central plaza waited to channel the harmonized energies that would briefly unite the village's divided powers. As Kaeldin made his way through the eastern quarter, villagers nodded respectfully, some with genuine warmth, others with the perfunctory acknowledgement due to the son of a village elder. His father, Varin Eramor, had high expectations for Kaeldin's future. As one of Marashar's most influential Solarans, Varin had ensured his son received the finest training from bond sages across Eden. The central plaza was a flurry of activity. Solarans worked efficiently in the remaining daylight, constructing platforms and arranging displays, their movements precise and energetic, while their powers remained at full strength. On the western side, Luminarans were beginning to emerge as their emerald moon rose, their movements growing more fluid and graceful with each passing moment. Elder Moraine stood beside the quartz obelisk, directing a group of young Solarans who were polishing its crystalline surface. The elder's skin had the golden hue of one bonded to sundrop flowers, and the bark-like texture on his arms revealed his second bond with sentinel trees. "Ah, Kaeldin," Moraine called. "Come, we must discuss your position for tonight's harmony demonstration." As Kaeldin approached, he noticed a figure watching from the shadows of the western arcade. Even at this distance, he recognized the silver-green eyes of Lyrian Nightshade. She stood with the characteristic poise of those bonded to shadow fauna, her movements liquid and predatory. When their eyes met, she didn't look away, and Kaeldin felt a strange resonance, as if the Edian energy flowed differently between them. Tonight would indeed be interesting, if only he knew just how much. The last light of Solara was fading when Kaeldin completed his preparations. He had donned his ceremonial attire, a sleeveless tunic of woven sky silk that amplified his aerokinetic abilities, and braces embedded with small shards of sky dust crystal that glimmered with stored solar energy. His father had presented him with a pendant of pure solar quartz that morning. a traditional gift for one's child before their potential final bonding. "Have you decided?" Varen had asked as he fastened the chain around Kaeldin's neck. Kaeldin's hand had gone instinctively to the pendant. "Not yet, Father. The Bond Sages have presented several worthy options. The Spirehawk would complement your existing bonds well, and restrict me to the skies forever," Kaeldin had replied. "I'm not sure that's my path." Varen's expression had tightened momentarily before softening again. "Your path is yours to choose, son, but choose with wisdom. The third bond is typically one's last, unless..." He hadn't needed to finish the thought. They both knew the risks of a fourth bonding. Now, as twilight deepened, Kaeldin watched the central plaza fill with villagers. Solarans congregated to the east of the obelisk, their powers diminishing as daylight faded. They would soon rely on the stored energy in their crystals and artifacts until morning. Luminarans gathered to the west, their abilities waxing with Luminara's ascent. The air crackled with anticipation and the subtle friction of opposing energies. "Nervous?" asked Thana, appearing beside him with 2 cups of spiced cider. Kaeldin accepted one gratefully. "A bit. My demonstration comes at the peak of twilight, when both celestial bodies are in perfect balance." Thana nodded. "Ambitious, your control will be tested. That's the point, isn't it? To show mastery." He sipped the warm liquid, letting it calm his nerves. "Speaking of mastery," Thana murmured, nodding toward the western side, "your Luminaran admirer has arrived." Lyrian moved through the crowd with the fluid grace of one bonded to a shade stalker. Her movements held the telltale precision of a night hunter, and in the growing moonlight, Kaeldin could see the faint dappled pattern on her skin, silvery spots that caught and reflected Luminara's glow. Her second bond was evident in the trailing vines that had become part of her dark hair, occasionally shifting of their own accord. Starlace, one of the rarest flora bonds. She wasn't alone. Beside her walked a tall, imposing Luminaran man, whose skin had the translucent quality of those bonded to shade shards. When he moved, his arms briefly crystallized, reflecting emerald light in fractured patterns. His second bond was less obvious until he turned, revealing eyes that glowed with the iridescent blue of deep water stones. "Who's that with her?" Kaeldin asked, trying to sound casual. Thana's expression grew serious. "Marek Shadowstone. He's from the northern settlements. Rumor has it he's considering a third bond tonight, with something dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "The kind of bond most sages would advise against." Thana lowered her voice. "Some say he's been visiting the Blighted Hollows, seeking communion with the entities that dwell there." Kaeldin frowned. The Blighted Hollows were avoided by sensible folk. The flora, fauna, and minerals there had been corrupted generations ago by a cataclysmic surge in Eden's energy, a discordance between Solara and Luminara that had warped everything it touched. Before he could respond, trumpets sounded, announcing the commencement of the festival. Elder Moraine and his Luminaran counterpart, Elder Vessa, approached the obelisk from opposite sides. Vessa's skin glittered with embedded moonstone, and her eyes, held the vertical pupils of one bonded to night foxes. "Citizens of Marashar," Moraine's voice carried across the plaza. "Tonight, we celebrate the Twilight Concordance, when Solara and Luminara share the sky in perfect harmony. When the energies that divide us also unite us," Vessa continued, her melodious voice contrasting with Moraine's deeper tones. "For this brief time, all of Eden's children stand equal in power and purpose." As the elders spoke, Kaeldin noticed Lyrian separating from Marek and moving along the perimeter of the crowd. Their eyes met briefly, and she tilted her head slightly toward a quieter alcove near the western arcade. The invitation was clear. "I'll find you before the demonstration," Kaeldin whispered to Thana, who rolled her eyes but nodded. He made his way through the crowd, careful not to draw attention as the elders continued their ceremonial speech. By the time he reached the alcove, Lyrian was already waiting, her silver-green eyes luminous in the growing moonlight. "Kaeldin Eramor," she said, his name flowing from her lips like water over stones. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't notice my invitation." "I noticed," he replied, finding his voice steadier than expected, "though I'm surprised you extended it, given the company you keep." A slight smile curved her lips. "Marek? He's my cousin, recently arrived from North Haven. He's intense, but family nonetheless. I heard he's seeking a dangerous third bond." Lyrian's expression shifted, concern briefly replacing amusement. "You've heard correctly. He believes Solarans have tipped the balance of power in Marashar. He came here to..." She hesitated. "To make a statement." Alarm rippled through Kaeldin. "What kind of statement?" "Nothing violent," she assured him quickly, "but provocative. He wants to showcase Luminaran potential at its peak. He thinks too many festivals cater to Solaran traditions. And what do you think?" She studied him for a moment. "I think there's wisdom in balance, in understanding both sides." Her eyes flicked to the pendant at his throat. "You're considering your third bond tonight." "How did you know?" "The pendant, the way the elders watch you, the nervous energy in your movements." She stepped closer, and Kaeldin caught the scent of night blossoms. "Have you decided?" "No," he admitted. "Everyone has expectations, but none align with what I feel is right for me." Lyrian's expression softened. "The bond must be true to your essence. Anything else risks disharmony." From the plaza came the sound of applause as the elders concluded their speech. The demonstrations would begin soon, displays of power and skill from both Solarans and Luminarans. "I should go," Kaeldin said reluctantly. "My demonstration. At peak twilight, I know." Lyrian reached out, her fingers briefly touching the pendant at his throat. "I'll be watching. And Kaeldin, be wary tonight. Marek isn't the only one with strong feelings about the balance of power in Marashar." With that cryptic warning, she slipped back into the shadows, leaving Kaeldin with more questions than answers. As he returned to the main plaza, the first demonstrations had begun. A group of young Solarans manipulated crystallized light into complex patterns, their powers already diminishing as Solara disappeared below the horizon. On the opposite side, Luminaran performers were growing stronger. One woman, her essence bonded to moonshadow wolves, commanded darkened silhouettes that danced around her like loyal pets. Thana found him as he reached the eastern side, "You're cutting it close," she warned, "and you look troubled." "Something's not right," Kyaldin said quietly. "Lyrian warned me to be careful tonight." Thana's expression grew serious. "What did she say exactly?" Before he could answer, a commotion erupted from the northern edge of the plaza. Gasps and cries of alarm spread through the crowd as people backed away from something. Kyaldin caught glimpses through the shifting crowd, a figure moving with unnatural speed and fluidity, its form seeming to shift and change in the twilight. "By the Celestials," Thana whispered. "Is that a Vileborn?" Elder Moraine's voice cut through the growing panic, magically amplified to reach every corner of the plaza. "Everyone, remain calm and move toward the southern exits." But calm was already lost. As the creature burst into the clearing around the obelisk, Kyaldin saw it clearly for the first time. It had once been human, but multiple unchecked bondings had twisted it beyond recognition. Its lower body resembled a massive serpent, scales shifting between obsidian and crimson with each movement. Its torso remained vaguely humanoid, though covered in crystalline growths that pulsed with discordant energy. Most disturbing were the fungal formations erupting from its shoulders and back, releasing spores that glittered ominously in the combined light of sun and moon. 4 bonds, maybe 5, Thana breathed in horror. "How is it still conscious?" That was the terrible truth of Vileborns. They retained enough of their human consciousness to be dangerous, directed by twisted purpose rather than mere feral instinct. This one moved with clear intent, heading directly for the quartz obelisk at the center of the plaza. "The harmony crystal," Kyaldin realized aloud. "It's going for the obelisk." As chaos erupted around them, Kyaldin saw Lyrian across the plaza, her eyes meeting his with shared understanding. Whatever was happening, it threatened them all, Solara and Luminara alike. The Vileborn moved with horrifying speed, its serpentine lower body propelling it across the plaza, while villagers scrambled to escape. Kyaldin watched in shock as it reached the quartz obelisk and began to scale its crystalline surface, the fungal growths on its back releasing clouds of spores that clung to the sacred structure. "It's poisoning the harmony crystal," someone shouted. Kyaldin felt a surge of protective instinct. The obelisk was more than symbolic. It helped regulate the flow of Edian energy throughout Marashar. Without it, the delicate balance between Solaran and Luminaran powers could destabilize, causing unpredictable surges and depletions. Without conscious thought, he drew upon his bonds, pulling air currents around him and launching himself toward the obelisk. The aero-orchid essence within him responded eagerly, propelling him in a controlled arc above the fleeing crowd. "Kyaldin, wait!" Thana called after him, but he was already committed. As he approached, he saw Elder Moraine and several other Solarans attempting to contain the situation, but their powers were waning with the setting of Solara. Conversely, the Luminarans, who might have been strong enough to help, were holding back, uncertain or unwilling to intervene in what some might perceive as a Solaran problem. Kyaldin landed on a platform near the obelisk and assessed the situation. The Vileborn was halfway up the crystal structure, its malformed hands leaving corrosive marks wherever they touched. The creature turned at Kyaldin's arrival, revealing a face that retained just enough humanity to be truly disturbing. patches of normal skin interspersed with scales, crystals, and fungal growth. One eye glowed sapphire, the other emerald. "Stand down, Vileborn," Kaeldine commanded, drawing air into swirling patterns around his hands. "Leave the obelisk." The creature's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. "The balance must be broken," it hissed, its voice layered with multiple tones speaking in unsettling harmony. "Too long have we lived divided." It released another cloud of spores, which Kaeldine barely managed to deflect with a hastily conjured air current. The effort drained him more than it should have. Solara's influence was fading faster than usual. From the corner of his eye, Kaeldine caught movement, a fluid shadow leaping onto the platform beside him. Lyrian materialized from the darkness, her bond with the Shade Stalker allowing her to move through shadows as if they were doorways. "This is no random attack," she said, her silver-green eyes fixed on the Vileborn. "It's targeting the energy flow deliberately." Kaeldin spared her a quick glance. "Can you help? My powers are diminishing with the sunset." "While mine grow stronger," she acknowledged, the starlace vines in her hair beginning to glow with absorbed moonlight. "But I'll need your insight. The creature bears both Solaran and Luminaran bonds." The Vileborn launched itself from the obelisk, landing heavily on their platform. Up close, the horror of its transformation was even more apparent. What had once been a person was now a patchwork of misaligned bondings fighting for dominance within one tortured form. Lyrian moved first, her Shade Stalker reflexes allowing her to dodge the creature's initial lunge. The starlace in her hair extended, weaving a pattern of light that momentarily confused the Vileborn. Kaeldine followed her lead, using his fading aerokinetic abilities to create a funnel that cleared the toxic spores from the air around them. Working together, they established a rhythm, Lyrian using her growing Luminaran strength to distract and contain the creature, while Kaeldin employed tactical bursts of his dwindling power. He condensed air currents into solid platforms that Lyrian used to gain height advantage, while she bent light to create momentary blind spots in the Vileborn's vision that Kaeldin exploited. "We need to drive it away from the obelisk," he urged as they momentarily gained the upper hand. "No," Lyrian countered. "We need to understand its purpose. Something isn't right." Before Kaeldin could argue, a new figure leaped onto the platform. Marek Shadowstone, his crystalline arms fully formed into wicked blades that caught Luminara's light in fractured patterns. "Stand aside," he commanded. "This abomination must be destroyed." The Vileborn hissed at Marek's arrival, its focus shifting from the obelisk to the newcomer. "Brother," it gurgled through its malformed mouth. "You came." Marek faltered, his blade arms lowering slightly. "Neren, impossible." Kaeldin looked between them in confusion. "You know this creature." "My brother," Marek said, his voice hollow with shock. "He disappeared 3 seasons ago during a bonding ritual gone wrong. We thought him dead." The Vileborn, Neren, writhed, its form seeming to fight against itself. "Not dead, transformed, enlightened. I see the truth now, brother. The division weakens us. Solaran, Luminaran, artificial boundaries." Understanding dawned on Lyrian's face. "He's trying to corrupt the harmony crystal to break down the natural separation between Solaran and Luminaran energies." "That would cause chaos," Kaeldin said. "Unpredictable power surges, failed bondings." "Or an new unity. The Vileborn interjected. No more waxing and waning. All equal, all connected. Marek's expression hardened. At what cost, Naren? Look at what you've become. A necessary sacrifice, the creature replied. Others will follow, with purpose, with guidance, better transformations. As they spoke, Kaeldin noticed more villagers gathering below, no longer fleeing, but watching the confrontation with growing interest. The tension between Solarans and Luminarans that had simmered beneath the surface of Marashar for generations was coming to a head, catalyzed by this twisted manifestation of both energies combined. The Vileborn sensed the shift in attention and lunged suddenly toward the obelisk again. Kaeldin reacted instinctively, drawing upon his remaining power to create a solid air barrier. But his strength was fading too quickly. The barrier wavered, and the creature broke through, slamming into the crystal surface with enough force to crack its outer layer. "No!" Lyrian cried, the starlace in her hair extending to create a net of light that ensnared the hybrid creature. Marek moved with cold precision, his crystalline blades slashing at the creature that had once been his brother. "Forgive me, Naren," he whispered. The Vileborn howled, a sound of rage and pain that resonated with discordant energy. As Marek's attack connected, something unexpected happened. Instead of wounding the creature, the crystalline blade seemed to sink into its form, creating a momentary connection between them. Energy flowed visibly between Marek and the Vileborn, causing both to convulse. "It's drawing on his energy!" Kaeldin shouted. "Break contact!" Lyrian moved without hesitation, using her feline agility to tackle Marek away from the creature. They tumbled across the platform as the Vileborn reeled back, momentarily disoriented by the interrupted connection, but somehow strengthened by the brief energy transfer. Kaeldin saw his opportunity. Gathering the last reserves of his Solaran power and drawing on the stored energy in his sky dust bracers, he created a vortex of compressed air. With precise control, he directed it at the creature, not to wound, but to contain, encapsulating the Vileborn in a sphere of solidified air currents. "I can't hold this long," he gasped, the effort draining him rapidly as Solara's influence continued to wane. Lyrian was at his side instantly. "Then let me augment it with mine." She placed her hands alongside his, the starlace vines from her hair extending to intertwine with his arms. Where Solaran and Luminaran energies met, a strange harmony formed, neither sapphire nor emerald, but a balanced teal that strengthened the containment sphere around Naren. "This shouldn't be possible," Kaeldin whispered in awe. "Yet, here we are," Lyrian replied, a small smile touching her lips despite the dire situation. From below, gasps and murmurs rose from the gathered villagers. The sight of a Solaran and Luminaran combining their powers, something many believed impossible or forbidden, was as shocking as the Vileborn itself. Marek recovered from his fall, watching them with a complex mix of emotions crossing his face. "The energy patterns," he said finally. "They're stabilizing." Indeed, the chaotic fluctuations in the Vileborn's form seemed to calm within their combined containment sphere, though the creature itself continued to struggle against its prison. "We need to move it away from the obelisk," Kaeldin said through gritted teeth. The strain of maintaining the sphere was immense, even with Lyrian's help. "To where?" Marek demanded. "That's my brother, or what remains of him." "The sanctum beneath the Elder's Hall," Lyrian suggested. "It has containment chambers designed for unstable bondings." Working together, they began to move the sphere with its trapped Vileborn away from the obelisk. The creature fought against its confinement, but the balanced energy of their combined power seemed to inhibit its strength. As they made slow progress across the plaza, Kaeldin noticed the villagers parting to make way. Solarans and Luminarans standing side by side, their usual divisions momentarily forgotten in the face of this common threat. Among them, he spotted Thana coordinating with a Luminaran healer, tending to those affected by the Vileborn's toxic spores. For a brief, hopeful moment, Kaeldin thought they might succeed without further incident. Then, without warning, the cracked surface of the obelisk began to emanate pulses of discordant energy, the damage from the Vileborn's attack destabilizing the Harmony Crystal's core. "The obelisk is fracturing," someone shouted. "The energies are misaligning." Throughout the plaza, chaos erupted anew. Solarans, who had been weakening with sunset, suddenly surged with renewed power as raw, unfiltered energy from Solara leaked through the damaged crystal. Simultaneously, Luminarans experienced painful fluctuations in their connection to Luminara. The sudden energy surge hit Kaeldin like a physical blow, disrupting his control of the containment sphere. The carefully balanced teal energy wavered, fractures appearing in the solidified air. "Hold on," Lyrian urged, her voice strained as she poured more of her Luminaran power into maintaining the sphere. But it was too late. With a sound like shattering glass, the containment field collapsed, releasing the Vileborn. The creature seemed momentarily disoriented, then focused on Marek with terrible intent. "Brother," it hissed, its voice resonating with multiple tones. "Join me and become more." Before anyone could react, the Vileborn lunged at Marek, its fungal growths extending toward him like seeking tendrils. Kaeldin tried to intervene, but his control over his powers was compromised by the energy fluctuations from the damaged obelisk. Marek stood his ground, his crystalline arms reforming into shields rather than blades. "Niren, stop! This isn't the way!" The Vileborn paused, something like recognition flickering in its mismatched eyes. For a heartbeat, it seemed as if some fragment of Niren's original consciousness had surfaced through the chaos of its multiple bonds. Then, from the crowd below, a voice rang out. "For Marasha! For unity!" A figure leapt toward the platform, trailing fire and shadow. A young Solaran woman Kaeldin recognized as Elin, one of the village's most promising bonding candidates. She had always been outspoken about bridging the divide between Solarans and Luminarans. "Elin, no!" Kaeldin shouted, but she was already mid-leap, determination etched on her face. As she landed on the platform, Kaeldin saw with horror what she held. A containment vessel bearing the unmistakable glow of a freshly harvested essence from the blighted hollows. "I can stop this," she declared. "I can balance the energies." With terrible certainty, Kaeldin realized what she intended. "Elin, you've already bonded 3 times. A 4th will save us all," she finished for him, her eyes blazing with conviction. "Sometimes we must sacrifice for the greater good." Before anyone could stop her, Elin shattered the containment vessel against her chest, embracing the corrupted essence within. The effect was immediate and horrifying. Her body contorted as the new bond formed, fighting with her existing 3 bonds for dominance. The vileborn that had been Neren recoiled, as if recognizing the tragic path Elin had chosen, the same one it had walked before. As Elin's transformation began, Kaeldin, Lyrian, and Marek could only watch in helpless horror. The Twilight Concordance, meant to celebrate harmony, had descended into a night of chaos and tragedy that would forever change Marashar. The plaza erupted in screams as Elin's body contorted. Her existing bonds, fire moss, shadow fern, and crystal hawk, fighting against the corrupted essence from the blighted hollows. Unlike Neren's transformation, which had occurred in isolation, Elin's was happening before the entire village, a horrifying spectacle of good intentions gone catastrophically wrong. "We have to help her," Kaeldin shouted, moving toward Elin despite the danger. Lyrian caught his arm. "There's no reversing a 4th bond once it's begun. We need to focus on containment, for everyone's safety, including hers." The chaotic energy emanating from the fractured obelisk was intensifying the transformation. Raw, unfiltered power from both Solara and Luminara flowed unchecked, accelerating Elin's metamorphosis. Her skin rippled between crystal formations and organic matter, while flames danced across her body, alternating between natural fire and corrupted shadow flame. Neren seemed transfixed by Elin's transformation. "Sister," it murmured, its multiple-toned voice almost gentle. "Not alone now." Marek stepped forward, his crystalline arms morphing back into shadow blades. "We need to contain them both before they bond with each other. A vileborn pair could devastate the entire village." The implication struck Kaeldin like a physical blow. 2 vileborn, drawing on both Solaran and Luminaran energy, could potentially merge their essences into something even more dangerous, a possibility no one in recorded history had encountered. Below, the elders were attempting to organize an evacuation, but the damaged obelisk's energy fluctuations were affecting everyone's abilities unpredictably. Some Solarans found themselves suddenly powerless as their connection to Solara was severed, while others experienced dangerous power surges. Luminarans faced similar chaos in their connection to Luminara. "The obelisk is the key," Lyrian said, her eyes fixed on the fractured crystal. "Its disruption is feeding their transformation and preventing us from using our abilities reliably." "Can it be repaired?" Kaeldin asked. Marek shook his head. "Not quickly. The harmony crystal at its core would need to be rebalanced, which typically requires a full lunar cycle. Then we need to neutralize its output," Kaeldin decided, his mind racing. "If we can't repair it, we can at least stop it from making things worse." As they spoke, Elin's transformation reached a critical point. Her humanoid form bulged and shifted, taking on aspects of her multiple bonds in a discordant arrangement that mirrored Neren's monstrous appearance. Her eyes, once warm brown, now blazed with amber flames, vertical slits of shadow fire in their center. She turned those unsettling eyes toward Neren, and a wordless communication seemed to pass between them. The vileborn began moving in tandem, circling the platform like predators assessing prey. "They're working together," Lyrian whispered in horror. Their discordant energies are finding harmony with each other. Kaeldin felt a surge of determination. Despite the chaos, despite the fluctuating powers, they had to act. Lyrian, can your star lace bend light around the obelisk? Create a barrier? She nodded, understanding immediately. To isolate it from the celestial bodies, cutting off the influx of raw energy. I can try, but not alone. The disruptions are too severe. Marek. Kaeldin turned to the Luminaran man. Your crystal manipulation. Can you create a resonance that stabilizes rather than amplifies? Marek's expression shifted from skepticism to thoughtful consideration. Possibly. My deep water stone bond allows for energy dampening, but I've never attempted it on this scale. And I can use my air manipulation to create a containment field, Kaeldin continued, the plan forming rapidly. Not to trap the Vileborn, but to isolate the obelisk while you two work. It was a desperate plan, requiring 3 people with different abilities, Solaran and Luminaran, to work in perfect coordination. Under normal circumstances, such cooperation would be challenging enough. With the erratic energy fluctuations from the damaged harmony crystal, it seemed nearly impossible. But they had no choice. The 2 hybrids were growing stronger by the moment, feeding off the discordant energy and each other's presence. We need to move now, Kaeldin urged, before they fully synchronize. With unspoken agreement, they split up to take positions around the obelisk. The Vileborn sensed their intent and moved to intercept, but were momentarily distracted when Thana and a group of villagers created a diversion on the far side of the plaza. Kaeldin reached the base of the obelisk first, placing his hands against the fractured crystal surface. He could feel the chaotic energies pulsing within, Solara and Luminara's essences clashing where they should be harmonizing. Drawing on his aero-orchid bond, he began to spin air currents around the structure, creating a cylinder of rapidly moving air that would serve as the foundation for their containment effort. Lyrian positioned herself to catch maximum exposure to Luminara's light, the star lace in her hair absorbing the emerald glow greedily. With balletic sweeps of her hands, she began to bend the light around Kaeldin's air cylinder, creating a shimmering barrier that distorted visual perception of the obelisk. Marek completed their triangle, his crystalline arms pressed against the ground as he channeled his deep water stone bond. Blue-black energy rippled outward from his touch, creating a dampening field that began to counteract the wild fluctuations from the harmony crystal. For a moment, Kaeldin allowed himself to hope. The combined effect of their efforts was visible. The erratic pulses of energy from the obelisk becoming less frequent, less intense. Throughout the plaza, villagers paused in their panic as their connections to their respective celestial bodies began to stabilize. Then, the Vileborn attacked in unison, Niran targeting his brother while Elin launched herself at Lyrian. "Hold the barrier!" Kaeldin shouted, unable to assist without abandoning his own crucial role. Marek met his brother's attack with grim determination, his crystalline arms forming a defensive network that barely held against Niran's multifaceted assault. The Vileborn that had once been his brother attacked with terrible coordination, each of its disparate parts working in horrific unison. Lyrian faced equally dire circumstances as Elin unleashed a combination of fire and shadow that threatened to overwhelm her light-bending abilities. The star lace in Lyrian's hair writhed defensively, creating patterns of light that momentarily confused her attacker. Kaeldin maintained his air cylinder with increasing difficulty, the strain of prolonged manipulation taxing his reserves. He could feel his connection to Solara weakening further as the night deepened, while the disruptions from the obelisk continued to make his power fluctuate unpredictably. "I can't hold this much longer," Lyrian groaned, her voice strained as she fought to maintain her light barrier while defending against Elin's relentless attacks. Marek was similarly struggling, blood now visible on his human portions where Neren's attacks had penetrated his defenses. Kaeldin faced a terrible choice: maintain the air cylinder and hope his companions could defend themselves, or abandon the containment effort to help them. Either option seemed likely to end in failure. Then, from the crowd below, new voices called out, "For Eden's balance! For harmony!" Villagers began moving toward the obelisk, not fleeing from the danger, but approaching with purpose. What struck Kaeldin was the composition of the group: Solarans and Luminarans moving together, organized into pairs and trios. Elder Moraine and Elder Vessa led them, their ancient rivalry set aside in the face of this existential threat. "Join your powers," Moraine commanded. Throughout the plaza, villagers who had spent their lives separated by celestial allegiance began to coordinate their efforts. Solarans with dwindling but still potent daylight powers paired with Luminarans whose abilities waxed with the rising moon. Where their energies met, the same teal harmony Kaeldin and Lyrian had discovered began to manifest. The sight gave Kaeldin renewed strength. "Focus on the obelisk," he shouted to Lyrian and Marek. Indeed, the coordinated villagers were now forming a perimeter around Neren and Elin, using complementary abilities to contain their corrupted power. Thana worked alongside a frostborn Luminaran, their opposing elements creating a steam barrier that confused the creature's senses. Others employed similar tactics, powers that would normally clash instead finding unexpected harmony when properly aligned. With the immediate threat to their positions reduced, the trio worked on the obelisk. Their combined technique, air containment, light bending, and energy dampening, began to take effect more powerfully. The wild fluctuations from the harmony crystal slowed, then steadied, and finally began to harmonize once more. As the obelisk's energies stabilized, so too did everyone's connection to their celestial power sources. Solarans still experienced the natural waning of their abilities, but without the chaotic surges and failures. Luminarans similarly found their growing power more controllable, more focused. The Vileborn sensed the shift in the energy field and reacted with desperate fury. Neren and Elin redoubled their efforts to break free from the villagers' containment, their discordant forms pulsing with dual essence. "They're weakening," Marek called out, his aqua stone bond allowing him to sense the energy patterns. "Without the obelisk's chaos feeding them, their forms are becoming unstable." Indeed, both Vileborn seemed to be struggling to maintain cohesion, their multiple bonds fighting against each other without the external energy disruption to bind them together. It was both pitiful and terrifying to witness, beings caught between transformations, unable to find balance within themselves. Lyrian's expression softened with unexpected compassion. "They're in pain. Terrible pain." Kaeldin had never considered that aspect of a Vileborn's existence, the perpetual agony of incompatible bonds tearing at one's essence. "Is there any way to help them? To reverse what's happened?" Marek shook his head grimly. no known method exists to unbind someone once the transformation has progressed this far. The best we can offer is... He couldn't finish the thought. Containment, Elder Vessa supplied, approaching their position with solemn dignity. And perhaps, with time and study, a way to ease their suffering. Elder Moraine joined them, his golden Solaran skin dulled in the moonlight, but his resolve undiminished. The sanctum beneath the Elder's Hall has chambers designed for such purposes. With your combined technique stabilizing the obelisk, we can now safely transport them. The Elders organized teams of villagers, balanced groups of Solarans and Luminarans, to create a secure pathway to the Elder's Hall. Working together with newfound coordination, they managed to guide the increasingly unstable hybrids away from the plaza. As Naren passed Marek, the creature paused momentarily, its mismatched eyes focusing on its brother with what might have been recognition. "Remember me," it gurgled, the words barely comprehensible through its malformed mouth. Marek's crystalline arms softened slightly, reaching out to briefly touch what remained of his brother's shoulder. "Always," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. Similarly, as Elin was led away, her gaze found Kaeldin. "Worth it," she managed to communicate, her voice a discordant chorus of her multiple essences. "Unity, possible." Kaeldin wanted to tell her she was wrong, that her sacrifice had been unnecessary, that there had to have been another way. But looking around at the plaza, where Solarans and Luminarans continued to work together with unprecedented cooperation, he wasn't certain she was entirely mistaken. As the Vileborn were finally removed from the plaza, Kaeldin, Lyrian, and Marek maintained their positions around the obelisk, ensuring the harmony crystal remained stable. The immediate crisis had passed, but the night's events had forever changed Marasha, and perhaps all of Eden. Dawn approached Marasha with tentative fingers of light, as if Solara herself was uncertain of her welcome after the previous night's chaos. The emerald glow of Luminara still lingered on the western horizon, creating an extended twilight that bathed the village in the same teal harmony that had manifested during the crisis. Kaeldin sat on the steps of the Elder's Hall, exhaustion etched in every line of his body. He and others had worked through the night, first stabilizing the obelisk, then securing the Vileborn in the sanctum's containment chambers. The village was quiet now, most residents having returned to their homes to rest, but Kaeldin found himself unable to seek his own bed. "You look terrible," Lyrian observed, settling beside him with 2 steaming mugs of spiced tea. She offered him one, which he accepted gratefully. "You don't look much better," he replied with a tired smile, noting the shadows under her vibrant eyes. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as early rising villagers began to venture into the central plaza. What struck Kaeldin was how they moved, no longer segregating themselves to east and west based on their celestial allegiances, but mingling freely, sharing quiet conversations about the night's events. "Everything's changed, hasn't it?" he finally said. Lyrian nodded, her star-lace vines moving gently in her hair despite the absence of wind. "The question is whether the change will last beyond this crisis." "It has to," Kaeldin said with sudden conviction. "What we accomplished last night, Solarans and Luminarans working together, it proved what's possible. At a terrible cost," Lyrian reminded him gently. 2 lives transformed beyond recovery. Kaeldin's thoughts turned to Elin and Nerin, now confined in the sanctum below. The Bond Sages had administered calming essences to ease their suffering, but there was no cure for their condition. They would remain as they were, tragic examples of power sought without sufficient wisdom. Marek hasn't left his brother's chamber, Lyrian continued. He believes there might be a way to establish communication, to reach whatever remains of Naren's consciousness. Do you think that's possible? She shrugged, the movement causing ripples of light to dance through her star lace. I don't know, but hope is a powerful force, perhaps as powerful as celestial energy itself. The eastern sky brightened further as Solara began her ascent. Kaeldin felt the familiar warmth of connection as his Solaran essence responded to the sapphire light. After a night of fluctuating powers, the steady renewal of his strength was reassuring. The elders are gathering the village council at midday, he said. They want to discuss what happened and what comes next. And what do you think should come next? Lyrian asked, studying his face. Kaeldin considered the question carefully. I think Mara Shah needs to reconsider many things. The separation of Solarans and Luminarans has been based on practical considerations. Our powers wax and wane with our celestial sources. But that doesn't mean we need to live such divided lives. Some would say it's tradition, Lyrian pointed out, though her tone suggested she wasn't among them. Traditions should serve the people, not limit them. Kaeldin's gaze drifted to the obelisk, now surrounded by Bond Sages who were conducting a more thorough examination of the damage. What we discovered last night, the harmony that forms when our powers combine, that feels like knowledge we've overlooked or forgotten, or deliberately ignored, Lyrian suggested. Power is often jealously guarded. They lapsed into silence again, each contemplating the implications. The question of Kaeldin's third bonding still lingered unresolved, the pendant at his throat catching the first rays of Solara's light. Thana approached, her fire-touched skin gleaming in the morning sun. The elders are asking for you both. They've started examining the obelisk, and they're finding something unexpected. At the central plaza, a small crowd had gathered around the quartz structure. Kaeldin's father stood among them, a proud smile crossing Varin's features as he caught his son's gaze. At the center, the High Elders Moraine and Vessa stood side by side, their hands placed on the crystal's surface. Where the Vileborn's corruption had damaged the obelisk, a new pattern was forming, veins of teal energy that matched the harmony Kaeldin and Lyrian had created. The harmony crystal is healing itself, Elder Vessa announced, wonder in her voice. It's integrating both energies rather than simply channeling them separately. Like the village must do, Kaeldin said, the realization crystallizing within him. He reached for his pendant, understanding finally what his third bond should be. I've made my decision, he announced. All eyes turned to him. My third bond will be with neither Solaran nor Luminaran essence alone, but something between. He looked to Lyrian. If you're willing to help me. She stepped forward, understanding immediately. A shared bonding. It's never been attempted. Many things we thought impossible have happened in the past day, Kaeldin replied. Over the next few days, as Mara Shah rebuilt and reorganized eastern and western quarters, gradually integrating as villagers chose homes based on preference Rather than celestial allegiance, preparations were made for a historic ceremony. Under the guidance of bond sages from both traditions, Kaeldin and Lyrian would attempt to bond simultaneously with twilight orchids, rare flora that bloomed only during the brief moments when Solara and Luminara shared the sky. In the sanctum beneath the Elders' Hall, Marek continued his vigil beside the containment chambers. Sometimes, in moments of perfect stillness, the Vileborn seemed to find brief periods of lucidity. Through these fleeting connections, the bond sages began compiling knowledge about the danger and potential of multiple bondings. 1 week after the Twilight Concordance, villagers gathered once more in the central plaza. The damaged obelisk now pulsed with teal energy, stronger than before. As Kaeldin and Lyrian knelt before it, twilight orchids cradled between them, he felt not fear, but profound certainty. "This won't end in corruption," Lyrian whispered as their hands met around the shimmering blossoms. "No," Kaeldin agreed, watching as tendrils of sapphire and emerald energy began to weave together around their joined hands. "It will mark a beginning of unity." As twilight descended upon Marashar once more, the first of a new kind of bond formed, neither solely Solaran nor purely Luminaran, but something beautifully, powerfully, in between. And in that moment, Eden's future shifted toward harmony, even as new challenges waited beyond the horizon.